So this is a mini master class. So I was told I should give students kind of a taste what it's like to do a kind of unit as part of Master of Business Information Systems. So as I said, most of our students will become a business analyst or IT consultant. So I chose a very practical thing because we have very limited time. So I just showcase you with a particular type of BIS profession, which is about business process design. So this is a very small part of business information systems, but I think it's a good thing because all of us understand a process. We are all customers or stakeholders in a lot of process. So I think it's easy for you to understand. But this one, I would just want to show you what kind of things that involve as a BIS graduate, from ideate to kind of design, and then finally to implement some kind of IT innovation. So I will probably don't go through the slides like by detail because there's a lot of slides, but I will just quickly show you to give you an idea what this is about. So the business process design, in essence, is about how to do things in an efficient and effective way. So it's not just about kind of speed up the process, like to make things more efficient, but it's also about to do the right things. So because if you just kind of, make a not very good process more efficient, that's not very good because it didn't really deliver any customer value or achieve any business objectives. So the essence of this business process design is to do the right things right. So in other words, is for both effectiveness and also efficiency. That's actually a lot of things that we do as a BIS professional. So we want to actually deliver a system or IT innovation that to achieve both effectiveness and efficiency. So more formally, it's about design. So that's why here we talk about configuring the process architecture. So the students are kind of, you might think about yourself as a designer or architect that requires some of your creativity, that whatever you design, it needs to satisfy the customer desire in an efficient way. And because we are business information systems, so quite often we do talk about business objectives and customers, because that's what we are doing, for the business or for the organizations, and we want to add value to our customers. So in a lot of our courses or units, we are talking about customer experience. And obviously the customer, most often we refer to the kind of external customers, but also we can do IT innovations or systems for internal customers. But by the end of the day, both the internal and external customers need to be aligned in terms of their value and kind of desires. And all these need to actually drive the same business strategy. So just very quickly to show you, just on the very high level, of course, if you're doing a Master of BIS, you're doing a whole course for 12 weeks, you are going to learn a lot of the theories and a lot of different techniques and tools. But just on a very high level, to be very practical, this is the process normally you need to go through if you are going to improve an existing business process or you're designing or redesigning a process. So firstly, you need to identify the needs. Right? So you need to know what's the motivations of this process improvement or redesign project. And this is kind of applicable to all the BIS, because for every BIS project, it's always start with identify the business needs. So what's the problem, or what's the opportunities, or what's the gap in the current situation. So in this particular business process context, we need to look at the current process. What's the issue? Maybe it's because the customer, they complain about the time is too long, the waiting, the queue is too long, or it's because the business feel it's not very efficient in terms of utilizing their resources. So the first thing is you need to identify the needs. And through usually as a BIS professional, you probably need to get into a conversation with various stakeholders. You probably need to use various tools and techniques to do some of, let's say, the customer journey mapping, or you might need to actually have some kind of focus group to understand their pain points. There's a lot of techniques and tools which we're going to actually cover in various units in MBIS. But once you understand the needs, then you need to basically understand the current situation. So in terms of the business process improvement or design, we basically need to actually model what we call the as-is process. So which means the current process. So we need to look at, okay, what is the current process like, right? And to do that, we can use various tools. You can use graphical tools like a flowchart, which I'm going to show you one example later. Also, you can use more advanced, techniques like simulation, which we're also going to showcase to you later. And also, when we do all this kind of analysis and design, we also sometimes we have to base evidence. So it's not like by the guesswork. We have to be data-driven and evidence-based. So in terms of the performance of the process, we need to think about what kind of data need to be collected and how to collect those data. And once you collect the data, sometimes you're required to perform some kind of data analysis. So all these things you need to kind of think in the second phase, right? You model the process to see what's the current process is like in terms of the structure. Sometimes before looking at any statistics, you can see the structure of the process is not very, very effective. There's a lot of duplications or a lot of kind of, the redundant activities that you can remove. But once you have both the kind of basic understanding of the process and also the data, then the approach that we will teach in quite a lot of different units is you can simulate it using various simulation software. So simulation is very useful because one thing is it can simulate all kinds of things very fast, and it also allows the users to experiment with it. So rather than the business stakeholder experiment with the real organization, so by building a faithful simulation model, you can allow them to actually play with the simulation model and do some kind of like what if or sensitivity analysis. So I will show you one example, then you can convert that flow chart of the model and fit in all those data into a simulation software, and then you can simulate various things. And through the simulation model, you can see the performance metrics, and then it's very kind of data driven. You can see exactly what's the current performance is like. So what's the utilization of the resources, what's the customer waiting time, the whole cycle time, and then you can identify where are the gaps. Okay, so once you identify the gaps, then you need to think about, because it's all about analysis, and then you need to design a better kind of solution. So here we say we design the to-be process, right? So the improved or redesigned process. So the way you design it, you need to think about how to close those gaps that you identified. So how to address those issues. Some of the issues you might find the root cause and you can actually resolve that. Others you might probably thinking about, I need to really radically redesign the whole thing. Or maybe there is opportunity of a new technology that you can utilize, and then you can put them into this new design. So the design to be process, it's not very scientific, I would say, as any kind of design activities. It's more of an art than a science. So I think it's very important for our MBI student to actually have that creativity and have the innovativeness to design a to-be new process. So once you designed, so it's not really necessarily say this is a better one, right? You have to prove it. So once you design the new process, you have to simulate the new process and then you evaluate. And the beauty of the simulation software is that, as I said, you can experiment with different things, right? And you can identify which solution is the best by using all these kind of performance metrics. So you can, that's why here we have the cycle, the iteration. So you can simulate different solutions to see whether that achieve your needs or achieve your goals. And if not, you can actually, probably collect more data, simulate more, and identify the best solution. So that's kind of like a lot of things that we do as a BIS professional. So you identify your customers' pain point, their need, then you probably have a good understanding of what's the current thing. It might not be a business process, but it can be other things like your data models or other kind of, tasks, representation. And then you need to think of ways to actually analyze and then propose a better solution. And often, very importantly for our BI student to be able to really make professional, business-oriented kind of recommendations, like a consultant. So you need to write reports and really detailing what's your recommendation, what's the justifications, what's the evidence supporting your recommendation. And also, it's not just a report, you also need to be able to present. So the oral communication is also a very important part in our, education. So this require, you to have a lot of practice as part of the MBIS to learn how to actually produce very professional business-like report and also presentations. So yeah, just to show you an illustration, this illustration is in the healthcare, which is about improving the X-ray process at a county hospital. So this example is a bit kind of like dated, but I think it's still kind of relevant to some of the countries. So just quickly go through. So that's basically we go through step 1 to 5, as I showed you earlier. So firstly is to identify the needs. So quite often when the business stakeholders engage us as a consultant or business analyst, they have some kind of problems, right? In this case, the hospital wish to improve the service level of its regular X-ray operations. And basically they identify 2 pain points from different stakeholders. The first group of stakeholders are the patients. They feel the total required time is just too long, right? It's not good. And the management, on the other hand, they're concerned with the use of available resources. They feel some of the resources are underutilized, which basically kind of, reduce their profitability, basically. So what they want is for you, like for example, as a student, as a consultant, as a process improvement team, to really study these problems and to propose kind of improvement, or sometimes it might be the redesign the process. So the second step is you need to model the as-is process. So there is, as I said, many different tools and techniques that we teach as part of various part of the MBIS. But the one I'm going to show you here is what we call flowchart. It's a very commonly used tool. It's very easy and intuitive. As you can see, we only have like 7 symbols. So basically, this is a graphical tools. And actually, as part of BIS, we have a lot of techniques and tools, which is quite graphical, right? So it's very visual. So you basically show to the business people, they will understand, okay, this is roughly correct as the current process goes. So basically, they have the structure of the flows, like, whether this is sequential or parallel or selective, but also they identify different types of activities. Like here, we have 7 symbols. The operation is arguably the only value-adding activities as part of the business process. So those operations are usually the activity the business will keep because these are value-adding, right? They drive the profit. Inspection, the triangle thing, is basically is not adding value to the customer per se, but this is important because it helps business to actually control, right? The inspection is for the control, for the qualities and also for compliance issues. Then we have the storage and delay. These two are all basically like a holding tank. Like you don't really flow straight away. It's like just a kind of thing holding for a little while. But there is a difference between them. The storage is usually what we call planned delay. So like you have something put into the warehouse, so it's planned, right? Whereas delay is what we call unplanned kind of delay. So this is always undesirable. So then we have 2 arrows. One is transportation of physical items, like you transporting physical items between locations, or you can transport even like human beings. You transport one person to location A to location B. And the other one is just transportation of information, which basically is the linkage between all the activities. And finally, which is also very important symbol, is called decision. So quite often, the process is not just one route. It's possibly have multiple routes depending on a condition. So decision is basically like some kind of decision rules. Depending on the conditions, then you might route people or items differently. So just to show you this example, so this is basically the current X-ray process. So for the sake of this presentation, I consolidate everything very nicely into 12 steps. In real life, if you're going to have this kind of project as engagement, you probably have to talk to different stakeholders and you kind of take notes and then you consolidate them and order them in this particular kind of fashion. Okay, so here you can see there is different steps, and you can see some steps are bigger or longer than the others. Some steps actually involve two things, so on and so forth. But anyway, I will go through the things with you quickly. So the first thing is to leave the physician's office with instructions. So firstly, you need to kind of identify which kind of symbols you need to use, right? We have 7 to choose from. So it's very important you identify the correct one because it will help you to do the process analysis later. So this one, because it's kind of transportation, right? People leave and go into somewhere. So we put this as a kind of physical transportation. The second one is they need to wait for that orderly, and the orderly will bring them, whether on foot, wheelchair, or lying in the bed, to the X-ray lab. So once again, this one is about transportation, but quite often a lot of people, they will miss is that before the second transportation to the lab, there is actually a waiting period because you have to wait for the orderly. There's not really like a seamless kind of transition. So then you need to kind of, model using the flowchart accordingly. So you have a delay waiting for the orderly, and then you transport to the X-ray lab. The third one is basically here, you can see very clearly, they were left in the waiting area, basically indicating they need to wait. So there's another delay here, number 3, waiting for the X-ray technician. Then number 4 is basically is a bit long. So you can see they have 2 sentences, basically have 2 activities involved. The first one is the technician do some paperwork. And the second one is that technician leave the patient who queues up in front of the labs. So queue, in another word, is indicating another delay, another holding or waiting here. So as I said, there's 2 steps. So one is operation, so they do the paperwork, which is necessary. And the second one is for the patient to queue. Then the next one, they enter the lab, undress, take the X-ray. So all these things we call a value adding, right? So the customers or the patient in this case coming here to do the X-ray. So this is definitely all operations. A customer are willing to pay for that. It's called value adding operations. The next one is about now have a different darkroom technician develops the X-ray. However, at the same time, the patient and X-ray technician wait. Okay, so here we need to separate into 2 kind of lines in parallel. So while the technician develop X-ray is value adding, it's operation, but the patient and the other technician waiting at the same time, it's waiting. It's a waste at the same time. The next one is they will check the quality of the X-ray. So here, when we talk about checking or quality control, quite often this is a business value adding, which is that inspection, a square box. But also you can see in the bracket, the patient at the same time also waiting. So continuing our flow chart, the patient still waiting, another delay, whereas the technicians, they're doing the inspection. So after that, you can see here we comes in with the decision point. So if the X-ray are not clear, they need to send back, which means they need to be reworked, retake. This is about 25%. If they're acceptable, they can move on to the next step. So here you can see we have a 2-route, selective route. So 25% you go back and 75% you go forward. And here the 25 and 75%. So basically you need to collect the data to really know which percentage of those X-rays are of not good quality. But anyway, we are drawing these diagrams. So you can see number 8 going back 25%, the remaining going to the next one, which will be the packing up. So packing up here, we still consider as operation for this moment. Next one is the patient need to wait again for the orderly to take them back to the office. So here it's very clear, it's a delay. And then patient is taken back to the office by the orderly. So now you guys should know this is another transportation back to the office. And then we step 11, so the messenger service will transfer the X-ray to the physicians in a batch of 5 jobs. So this is a different kind of a person, the messenger service, which will actually wait for the X-ray to be reached 5, and then they will deliver. So this is, you can see number 11 is also transportation, but they are transport the packed X-ray in a batch of 5. And finally, these two converge and they will actually enter the office together. So in 12, they will merge and then transport to the office. So that I'm just very quickly going through this process with you. But basically the idea is you need to understand the current situation. You write down the kind of scenario and then you model that using a particular tool or the modeling language accordingly. So that's our as-is current X-ray process. But as I said, we are evidence-based. We also need to collect some data, right? We also do some analysis because with this kind of process, quite often we call them they are random or stochastic process because patients don't come in a constant interval, right? So what you need is to collect all the data and put all the data into a kind of like software, like spreadsheet, for example. You conduct some data analysis and then you can determine what's the correct probability distribution to fit into the model. I will show you one example in here. And then, for example, here we have 2 types of patients arrive to the X-ray process. For the emergency, which we have a higher priority, they will actually, they're arriving according to a Poisson process, right? That's fine. But the second type, which are non-emergency patients, they basically have varied kind of random kind of arrival time. So what you do is you basically collect data, right, for a kind of significant length of time. So here we have 16 patient, but you can collect more, right? You can probably go through a few weeks or months. You probably need to consolidate different times, peak hours, peak seasons and things like that. But then you basically collect all this time of arrival from time 0. And then what you do is you need to put them into a spreadsheet, as I said, then you analyze them. So here we use a very simple histogram. You can plot the data and now you can see the frequency. And for those of you who have a little bit basic kind of business statistics knowledge, you will know this is actually an exponential distribution. So you can, based on this analysis, you can determine the nature of the probability distribution, and you also can determine the kind of the mean of it. So these are kind of data you need to fit into your model later. So to skip everything, so we collect all the data. So you can see the data, some of them are constant, others are not so much. So quite often for the random or stochastic process, they might fit into a probability distribution. Some of them are like normal distribution, others are like uniform distribution. But nevertheless, you collect all the data, fit into all these different types, and then you can fit in. So a little bit more about the case. So this is actually, give you a little bit more details, but also some of them, if you read through, they're like assumptions, right? So for every business and for any modeling, you have to have some assumptions. So here we said, with the priorities, so emergency patient will always have a higher priority than the non-emergency patient. However, if the non-emergency patient already started the X-ray process, then they won't be interrupted. Okay, so then you also can see the current process, what's kind of resource available. They have 5 different type of resources and they have different number of units. Right, so this helps you to later to analyze the resource utilization. And also currently they have the assumptions about the orderly have to always take patient back when they dropped one, and also the time of transportation, and all that. So these are the current process assumption, which may or may not be good or may not be valid later. So you can think about all these kind of assumptions and all this current way of doing things. Then you can design the new process by actually changing some of the procedure rules or by changing some of the process structure. So the next step is, as I said, we are going to simulate, because simulation is a very powerful tool and will allow you to do all sort of kind of analysis and experimentation. So the software that we teach as part of this MBRS is called Extensim, which is a kind of quite robust or comprehensive simulation software. And it's a licensed software. So basically for all the business process, we're doing this, we call dynamic, stochastic, and discrete event simulation models. Dynamic, basically this model is changing over time. So time is important, in another word. Stochastic, as I mentioned, This means random. So the customer coming, patient coming, they are not constant. And discrete event means that every patient or the customers, you can count them. They are discrete unit. It's not continuous. So I'm not going to teach you how to do the simulation because obviously this is a very comprehensive software. Like in the current units I'm teaching, we will spend 2 weeks at least just teaching the basics, and then we give students a few weeks to actually use the software and actually doing some kind of modeling and design. So this is basically what we built based on the flow chart I just showed you, and also all the information, the data, everything we put together and we build this simulation model. Okay, so it's very important when you kind of build a model, whether it's kind of draw on the paper like the flow chart or it's kind of building in a simulation software, the model has to be faithful to the real world. So that's a very important aspect of IS. So if the model is wrong, then everything you do basically it's all fall apart. So it's very important that you have the correct data, have the correct process structure, and then so that your simulation model is a faithful representation of the real world. So what we need to look at is basically the performance metrics. So assuming this model is correct, right, it's a faithful representation of the real X-ray process. And then we look at the current process performance metrics. And these are all different things. Like the first one is a resource utilization. And you can see very quickly that two of the resources, the utilization are not great. So remember, the management, they're concerned with the resource utilization. So obviously they do have their reason to believe so, because two of the resources they kind of currently invest in are not really kind of, utilized a lot. And the cycle time is basically how long the customer need to go through the whole process from end to end. So, here we call cycle time, which is like a technical term, but like from customer experience point of view, it's their time they experience in this whole process. So you can see it's very long, right? So 155 minutes. So it's more than 2.5 hours on average. So this is the average value. Then also we have the next one, which is a Q statistics. Right? So Q is more from the customer perspective. So how long they wait for the orderly when they go in, how long they wait for the paperwork, how long they wait for the X-ray room to be ready. So all these are the mean values. Okay, so you can see they are all pretty high. Other than the last one, which is very short, is under a minute, the rest are all very high. So these are basically the pain point or the gaps in the current process. And these are the areas you need to think about, okay, so these are the problems, right? How can I actually, make things better? How can I actually close those gaps? So here I just show you one of the design solutions. So basically, you can come up with all sorts of plausible ways of reducing the cycle time by redesigning the process. So here are a few kind of thinking points. So how about, you change the procedure, right? The X-ray technician do not need to really stay when the X-ray are developed. That's obviously a waste of, valuable resources. What if the messenger's batch size change? So why they need to wait for the 5, right, to deliver them? And whether this messenger service is necessary at all, right? Can you actually just remove them to really kind of streamline the process? And if you need to hire more personnel or more resources, then which ones to hire and how many, right? And all these are good questions. So what you need to do is you need to basically, to try and error. You try different kind of plausible solutions, and then you find the best. So here I just show you one possible solutions, which here are the redesign or the improvement. So according to the previous questions, they no longer need to wait while the X-ray was developed, remove of the messenger service totally, hire one more orderlies, because this is basically what we call the bottleneck resource, constrain the whole process. And also we change the procedure so that they can actually not restricted to be not going to pick up the patient only. So just to quickly show you, this is the new designed process. So you can see this part I circled is obviously a lot more simpler than the previous one. So this is the previous one. You can see these are the red ones that we changed or removed. to this kind of new way of doing things. And that procedure change of removing the messenger service really kind of streamlined the process quite a bit. And the process structure is one thing, but what's more important for us as a business analyst is to look at the performance improvement. So here I put the before and after performance metrics. So let's just compare. You can see the utilization. Early on, we highlight this as a problem. And now you can see these two resources after this change, they all kind of, relatively well utilized. So they don't have like a lot of idle times. And in terms of the cycle time, you can also see that dramatically reduced, right? So from a patient perspective, it's a lot faster to finish the whole process. Also, the throughput improved. The throughput is like the productivity, right? How many they actually can complete within a particular unit of time. So this is also great because they kind of almost double the throughput. And finally is the Q stats. So early on, we identify from the patient perspective, the waitings are very long. And for those two very long waitings, you can see they're dramatically reduced. And for the last one, the wait for orderly out is increased a little bit, but still it's within a kind of acceptable range. So that's basically is the whole process, that we go through. Just to give you a taste, as a business analyst, if you are doing this, as a business process consultant, that's probably the kind of things that you might do. These are the steps or the process you are going to go through, and you basically need to have some technical skills to do the kind of, modeling and design. And also you need to be able to kind of make some recommendations and discussion based on your findings. So that's the end of that example. So this is just one example that I prepared to illustrate the idea. But obviously, there's a lot of different examples that we teach and ask students to model and to improve process. So some of them are kind of more business related, like a credit application process, order fulfillment, which is quite often that we use in our course. Also like a loan application process. But also we also look at some of the examples, which is kind of not for profit. For example, the adoption process in the Humane Society. I did ask a student to actually model a particular animal adoption kind of, facility. So all these things can be modeled. So although we say it's business process design, it's not necessarily to be the profit maximizing business, also can be the profit business for a community or society in general. So that's the end of my presentation.